A letter from my ex-girlfriend. It's been 5 years. 5 years since I finally, painfully and messily, extracted myself from that relationship. It was one of those relationships that doesn't just end, it leaves a crater. She was my first real love, and she was a master of a quiet, insidious kind of cruelty, a manipulator of the highest order. Every argument was my fault. Every insecurity I had was a weapon she would sharpen and use against me. By the end, I was a hollowed-out, anxious wreck of a person. It took me years of therapy, of rebuilding my own self-worth from the ground up, to feel even remotely normal again. I hadn't seen or spoken to her in half a decade. I thought I was free. Then, last month, the box arrived. It was a small, unassuming package in my mailbox. No return address, just my name and address, written in a familiar, elegant, sharp cursive that I recognized instantly. A cold, heavy feeling, a ghost of an old anxiety, settled in my stomach. Her handwriting. On a small cardboard tag tied to the box with a black ribbon were 7 words, also in her hand. For all the things I should have said. My first instinct was to throw it away, unopened, to just toss it in the dumpster and pretend it never came. But I couldn't. The curiosity, the morbid need for a final, long overdue sense of closure was too strong. I took it inside. The box itself was beautiful. It was a small, ornate thing, carved from a dark, heavy wood, with intricate patterns of vines and leaves winding around its sides. It felt old, ancient even. I sat at my kitchen table, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, and I lifted the lid. Inside, the box was empty. It was lined with a deep, dark, light-absorbing velvet. There was no letter, no trinket, no explanation. Just an empty, velvet-lined box. I felt a surge of frustrated, familiar anger. Of course. Even now, 5 years later, she was still playing games, sending a cryptic, beautiful, and ultimately empty gesture. It was so perfectly her. I put the box on a bookshelf in my living room, a strange, dark little monument to a past I was trying to forget, and I did my best to put it out of my mind. The next morning, I was getting ready for work. I walked past the bookshelf, and something caught my eye. There was a small folded piece of white paper sitting in the center of the box's dark velvet lining. I froze. I knew with an absolute certainty that the box had been empty when I went to bed. My apartment door was locked. No one had been in. My hands were trembling as I reached for it. I unfolded the paper. On it, in that same sharp, elegant cursive, was a single sentence. "I'm sorry for making you feel small at that dinner party with your friends." I stared at the note, my mind reeling. The dinner party. It had been 7 years ago. A small gathering at a friend's apartment. She had spent the entire night subtly, skillfully, undermining me in front of my oldest friends, making me the butt of a dozen gentle jokes that left me feeling like an idiot. I had almost forgotten about it. But the apology, it was so specific, so verbatim to the conversation we'd had in the car on the way home, where I had used those exact words. "You made me feel small." I spent the rest of the day in a daze, the note folded in my pocket, a strange hot coal against my leg. When I got home from work, I went straight to the bookshelf. There was another note. "I'm sorry for reading your journal." My blood ran cold. She had always sworn she hadn't. It had been a huge fight, a suspicion I could never prove. But here it was, a confession, a posthumous admission of guilt. I checked again an hour later. Another note. "I'm sorry for lying about where I was that night." This was the rhythm of my life for the next week. The box became an endless, automated apology machine. Every time I looked, a new note, a new folded piece of paper, a new shard of our toxic past would be waiting for me. At first, it was cathartic, validating. Every note was a confirmation that I hadn't been crazy, the gaslighting, the manipulation. It had all been real. It was like all the old wounds I had were finally being lanced, the poison drained away. I'm sorry I told your mother you were the one who broke her antique vase. I'm sorry I flirted with your best friend at your birthday party. I'm sorry I made you quit your painting class. But then the apologies started to get darker, more intrusive. I'm sorry for watching you while you slept. I found that one on a Saturday morning. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. I remembered waking up sometimes in the dead of night with the feeling of being watched, only to see her lying beside me, her eyes closed. I had always dismissed it as a dream. I'm sorry for putting that keylogger on your laptop. That one explained so much. The way she always seemed to know what I was thinking, who I was talking to. The way she would bring up things from private emails, pretending it was just a lucky guess. I'm sorry I followed you to work that day you said you were sick. The box wasn't just apologizing for the things I knew about. It was revealing a secret, hidden history of stalking and violation, a level of obsession and control that I had never even suspected. The catharsis was curdling into a deep, creeping horror. It was an invasion, a reopening of a past that was far more monstrous than I had ever realized. I had to get rid of it. I took the box, my hands shaking with a mixture of fear and rage, and I threw it in the dumpster behind my apartment building. I watched it disappear under a pile of trash bags. I felt a sense of finality, of relief. The next morning, it was back on my bookshelf. It was sitting in the exact same spot, polished and pristine, and inside a new note was waiting. I'm sorry you tried to throw me away. Panic, a raw, frantic animal panic, began to set in. I took the box out to my small concrete patio, and I took a hammer to it. I swung with all my might. The hammerhead connected with the dark wood with a loud crack, and bounced off, leaving not so much as a scratch. The wood was impossibly, unnaturally hard. The hammer, however, had a new dent in its head. The box was a part of my life now, an unmovable, unbreakable, and unending source of my past's poison. And then the apologies started to change. They started to become predictive. One morning, a note appeared that was different. It was about the future. I'm sorry for what the man on the bus is about to say to you. I stared at the note, a sense of profound, dizzying wrongness washing over me. An hour later, on my commute to work, the bus lurched, and a large, angry-looking man stumbled and spilled his coffee. He turned and glared at me, even though I was a full 3 feet away. "Watch where you're going, you idiot," he snarled, his voice full of a bizarre, unearned venom. The box wasn't just dredging up the past anymore. It was predicting, or maybe even causing, new negativity in my life and then apologizing for it. The notes became a mix of past and present. I'm sorry I dented your father's car and let you take the blame. I'm sorry for the flat tire you're going to get this afternoon. I'm sorry I told all our friends your novel was just a stupid hobby. I'm sorry your boss is going to lose that important file. It was a constant, unending stream of misery, both remembered and newly delivered. I was living in a psychic minefield, with the box as my own personal, malevolent fortune teller. I had to talk to her. I had to stop this. I dug through my old contacts, my fingers feeling like clumsy sausages, and I found her number. I hadn't deleted it. I just never looked at it. I called. It went straight to a disconnected tone. I tried her social media. Her profiles were all gone, deactivated. I was getting desperate. I called one of our old mutual friends, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. "Hey," I said, my voice shaking. "This is going to sound really, really weird, but I need to get in touch with her. It's an emergency. Do you have a new number for her?" There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. Are you okay?" my old friend finally asked, his voice full of a strange, cautious concern. "Yeah, I'm fine. I really need to talk to her. Another pause. "Dude," he said, his voice soft. "She's dead. She died a year ago." The phone slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. I just stood there, the blood roaring in my ears. Dead. She was dead. "A car accident," my friend's tinny voice continued from the floor. "It was really awful. I thought you knew." Her parents sent out an announcement. I hung up. She was dead. For a year. But the box had arrived a month ago. And the notes, they were still coming. I stumbled to the bookshelf. The box was there, a dark, silent void, and inside a new, folded note. I picked it up with a hand that was so numb I could barely feel the paper. "I'm sorry I died." My mind shattered. The last fragile barrier between the rational world and this impossible waking nightmare dissolved completely. This wasn't a sick prank. This wasn't a final manipulative game. This was something else. Something from beyond the grave. I'm writing this now because I don't know what else to do. I am trapped. The notes haven't stopped. But they're different now. They're no longer just apologies for the life we shared. They're dispatches. Postcards from whatever hell she's in. And they are more terrifying than any of her earthly cruelties. This morning, there were 3. "I'm sorry I was thinking of you when I died. I was holding this box. That one made me physically ill." I was the last thought in her head. And somehow, in that final moment, she had tethered this thing to me. "I'm sorry the sky is red here. I'm sorry the people here don't have hearts. They just have empty spaces." The last note, the one that is sitting on my desk right now, the one that has finally pushed me to write this, to scream into the void and pray someone has an answer, arrived an hour ago. "I'm sorry. I have to go now. The one with the smiling face is coming for me again. I don't know what to do. I think I am tied to a ghost, and her only connection to the living world is me. The box is on my bookshelf, and I know, with a certainty that is slowly crushing the life out of me, that a new note is already waiting, and I am so afraid to read it. I wish I'd never found out what went wrong. The worst deaths, in my opinion, are accidental. I read last week about a mother who rolled onto her newborn and suffocated it. Every year, toddlers die from being left in hot cars. And then you hear stories of kids playing games, like one boy who hid in an unplugged freezer and suffocated to death during hide and seek. Can you imagine? Can you imagine being the person responsible in any of these situations? To me, this is so much more terrifying than the prospect of the paranormal. I'd much rather be haunted by a ghost than by guilt over unintentionally hurting someone. My husband, Wade, is the opposite. He's unbothered by accidents, but petrified of horror movies about demons or vengeful ghosts. But as I told him, none of those things are real, so why be scared? He counters that accidents are without malice, therefore not as scary as murderous ghosts that might be real. I guess he has a point. About the lack of malice, not about ghosts that might be real. I know they're not, because if they were, my best friend would definitely be haunting me. I guess in some ways she is. You see, whenever I read about a prank gone wrong, I stop breathing for a moment. I'm choked by guilt. After all these years, I still don't know if it was my fault. I was never charged, and my friends insist I need to stop blaming myself. But how can I? How can I move on, not knowing if it's because of me? Rosa got into the suitcase on her own. Lakeisha and I helped her. We were all drunk, giggling. She was supposed to surprise Bolin. She had a huge crush on him. Let me back up. Let me try to explain. We were at a party. Our friend group had been together for years, and we rented out this lodge. Me, My husband Wade, who back then was just my crush, his buddies Bolin and Tucker and JB, and the girls who were my besties, Lakeisha and Rosa and Kay. There were also some other friends who stopped by who we'd met earlier in the day while hiking. I can't remember their names anymore. What I do remember is that we all had a lot to drink. And Rosa, she was in her flirty phase. Rosa was my best friend, but she wasn't perfect. She was like a butterfly who sips from every flower, a real heartbreaker, beautiful and passionate. I was a little bit jealous of the attention she had, and also kind of in awe of her. Whoever she was with fell hard, like she was the love of their life. But she never committed. She'd been on again, off again with JB, then seduced Wade, which was kind of bitchy because she knew I had a crush on him. She'd even flirted with bisexuality with Kay. Now her eyes were on Bolin. I forget whose idea it was for her to hide in the suitcase, mine or hers. All the luggage was in the basement because that's where the boys had put it when we'd arrived at the lodge. Lakeisha said something like, "Bolin's suitcase is big enough to hide a body." And that's when Rosa, or me, had the idea she'd hide in it. And Rosa decided to spice up the prank by wearing lingerie. When Bolin took the suitcase up to his room and opened it, he'd find a sexy surprise. We were stupid, stupid, stupid. None of us had good judgment, especially since we were tipsy. Once Rosa squeezed inside, whining about her hair getting caught in the zipper, Lakeisha and I went to go badger the boys to bring everyone's bags to their rooms. I remember Bolin delivered mine. I was staying outside in a tent with Kay. The lodge didn't have enough bedrooms for everybody, and we wanted to sleep under the stars. Kay had no idea about the prank and was confused when I kept urging Bolin to go inside and check his bag. Wink, wink. After he left, I told her about Rosa, and because Kay was actually sober, she told me to go make sure Rosa wasn't stuck in there. So I checked to make sure the suitcase wasn't still at the bottom of the stairs. At least, I think I did. But I was drunk. While all of us were sitting outside watching fireworks later, I noticed Bolin missing and asked Wade where he went. Bolin had gone up to his room early. Since he hadn't come back, Lakeisha and I assumed Rosa was in there with him and that her lingerie stunt had worked. In fact, Lakeisha and I were whispering about it all evening, quietly so as not to make any of the boys jealous. In the morning, when Bolin came down, Lakeisha and I asked him about last night, all smirks. He looked clueless. Then Lakeisha asked where Rosa was, and he was still clueless. But what about his suitcase? Hadn't he opened it? He said someone had shoved all his clothes into the closet in a pile. He wasn't sure why. He assumed he was being pranked or something and hadn't seen his suitcase. "So you never opened it?" asked Lakeisha. Dread bloomed in my belly. Oh God, I thought. Oh God, oh God. Lakeisha was telling him how we'd taken his clothes out and Rosa had hidden inside hoping to surprise him in her lingerie, and Bolin blushed and said he was gay. Gay. But his coming out to us hardly even registered because where was Rosa? None of us knew. We quickly went to wake everyone else up, hoping someone had seen her last night. Oh God, oh God, oh God, I checked. Didn't I check? I swear I checked. Prayers ran through my head, but I was drunk. I wasn't sure if I really had. I went downstairs to the basement. There was the suitcase, still tucked away at the bottom of the stairs. It was exactly where we'd left it when we zipped Rosa inside the night before. Nobody wanted to open the suitcase. The boys argued about who had left it there. JB said he'd lifted it, but noticed how heavy it was and asked someone else to take it. Each of them had thought another of the guys was going to grab it. Bolin didn't think to check because he found his clothes piled in the closet. I'm ashamed to say I went outside when Lakeisha reached for the zipper. Wade came out and joined me. He told me dead bodies, gore, things like that scared him. While the others checked the contents of the suitcase, Wade and I sat outside. As we heard the gasps and whispers of, Oh God, his fingers gripped mine tightly, and I put my head in my hands and sobbed. She'd suffocated, of course, but it had taken a long time. The police wondered why none of us had heard her gasping for help, but Kay sheepishly told them about the fireworks. A prank gone wrong, authorities ruled. My friends said then, and still say now, that ultimately Rosa was the one most responsible for her own misfortune, that she'd made her own decisions, that all of us were a little guilty, but none of us was wholly responsible for a tragic accident. But it was my hand that closed the zipper. I've lain in bed, thinking about her gasping for air. Why didn't she scream? Why didn't we hear any muffled shouts? I imagine her squeezed into the darkness while her pleas for help go unanswered, and I can't breathe. But the real reason I'm writing this is because this morning I saw a story in the news about a woman in her underwear found strangled on the beach. My husband switched away from the reporting, and when I asked why, he looked surprised and said he thought it might trigger me. Why? I asked. It wasn't a prank. I thought it might remind you of Rosa. You know, the lingerie, I suppose that aspect was similar. To be honest, that part of the tragedy had never really stuck with me as much. But now I think about how we all stopped talking about her afterward, how her death was only a blip in the news. No details were released. In our friend group, Rosa's death became a taboo subject, almost like she'd never been with us at all. We all silently agreed to forget her. But the more I think of that report on the news, the more I'm getting that feeling from that day. That top of the stairs feeling, like I'm looking down and seeing something I don't want to see. That oh God, oh God, oh God sense of impending dread. And I'm about to be sick. Because Wade dated her too, and loved her. And I'm more and more certain I looked down the stairs before the fireworks and there was no suitcase there. And now I'm wondering, if Wade never saw what was in the suitcase, never picked it up or opened it or moved it, how did he know she was in her lingerie when she died? My city has changed. I swear I'm not crazy, but I've been watching my town change, and it feels like I've been thrown 100 years into the future. When I was a boy, the streets were dirt, and children played stickball till dusk. You could hear the crack of bats and the laughter of neighbors from one end of Main Street to the other. Farmers sold eggs and apples at the roadside. Horses clopped past, wagons rattled, and the tallest building in town was the library, 3 proud stories with stained glass windows on the top floor. Everyone walked. It was the simplest thing in the world. To the bakery, to church, to the grocer. You could greet half the town just by strolling 2 blocks. But then, all at once, things began to change. The first week, the dirt roads were scraped smooth and covered in black stone. The footpath under the maples, the one we all took to the market, was plowed under. Progress, the mayor called it. The market itself was rebuilt farther away. Nobody minded except me when I realized the walk was twice as long. By the second week, the road had doubled, then doubled again. Yesterday, 2 wagons could pass side by side. Today, 6 roaring lanes of machines shot past. Crossing felt like standing before a firing squad. A boy named Samuel didn't make it across. The drivers only blasted their horns as if he had no right to be there. The buildings changed next. The library had once had colored glass windows on the 3rd floor. I remember climbing the stairs with my father. But one morning it was only a squat brick box, flat and windowless. Margaret's house lost its 2nd story overnight. People just shrugged. And then some buildings didn't just shrink, they vanished. The post office, the drugstore, the old theater. One evening they were there. By morning the lots were flat, striped in paint. Nobody even mentioned the loss. Main Street didn't mourn either. The family businesses went under, one by one. The tailor, the bakery, the toy shop. I thought there would be grief, but instead people smiled. They said, "It's fine, there's a bigger store 20 minutes away." They said it like it was good news, like it made things easier. Even the shopkeepers, faces pale in their empty storefronts, forced stiff little smiles and nodded as if it were all for the best. It was the smiles that unsettled me most. The corner store went differently. I woke one night to see a crowd standing outside it. They didn't shout, they didn't argue. They just pressed their hands to the brick. The walls creaked like something alive under strain. By sunrise, the store was gone. The ground was smooth and black. Mr. Alvarez was gone too. When I asked about him, people turned their faces away. Even the houses began to twist. Where there had once been little walkways leading from front doors to the street, the paths bent sideways overnight. Now they lead only to the driveways. Step out your door and you're steered straight to a car. The houses themselves seem to drift back a little farther each night. 10 feet, 20. In some cases you can barely see them from the street anymore. Voices don't carry that far, and the lawns keep stretching. I remember when Mr. Dawson pushed his mower while whistling, and Mrs. Henson swung her scythe like her father before her. The yards were small, the work quick. Now they look like fields. Nobody mows on foot anymore. They ride little machines across endless grass that wasn't so big yesterday. From a distance, the riders look like toys circling endlessly. The children are gone too. Not gone, but hidden. They used to play stickball in the street, chalk lines drawn across the pavement, shouts echoing through the block. Now, whenever an engine sounds, mothers rush out and yank them inside. Doors slam, curtains snap shut. The way the street empties reminds me of an old western, right before a gunfight. Except this happens every day. The strangest moment was when I was walking home one evening. I saw the Dawsons on their porch. When they noticed me coming down the street, they froze. Mrs. Dawson clutched her husband's arm. His face was tight with fear until I came close enough for him to recognize me. "Oh," he said, almost laughing. "It's only you." We thought it was somebody else, they didn't say who. But the way they hurried inside after shutting the door tight, I knew. Around here, anyone walking is treated like a danger. I tried walking toward the edge of town last week to see if the farms were still there. Mr. Whitaker used to sell apples and eggs from a stand by the road. My kids loved his fruit. But when I reached the spot, there were only neat houses and driveways. No barn, no stand, not even a fence post. A man watering his lawn frowned when he saw me lingering. "You're lost," he said flatly. Then he turned and his garage door closed behind him. And my friends are changing too. James once walked everywhere with his daughter, pointing out the old shops. He was the kindest soul I knew. But the first time I saw him behind the wheel, he nearly struck me in the crosswalk. He didn't wave. He didn't apologize. He leaned on the horn and sped so close I felt the heat of his engine. That wasn't James anymore. By the fourth week, I was the only one left walking. The streets roared with iron and smoke. The trees were gone. The porches were empty. Even the old dirt path to downtown has been erased. Where it once began, a new sign stands. No trespassing. This means you. I could see downtown just across the grass, close enough to touch. But I couldn't reach it, and now it's at my door. This morning the sidewalk was gone. My steps lead straight into 12 lanes of traffic. If I want to eat, I'll have to try to cross. I don't know if I'll make it back alive. The strangest thing is that everyone else seems happy. If you ever hear construction outside your window, if you ever wake to find the street wider than it was yesterday, don't stay. Run.